It started with a game.
If everyone would just bag the noise and play like we could do this.
Sonny, name one thing that's gotten better in the last 10 years.
Shall we play a game?
Video games.
All right, I acknowledge that.
Totally awesome video game!
Welcome back, class. Video Game Writing 101. It's been weeks since I've recorded my last video, and it feels like forever. Been to Arizona, my son, my wife, one of my sons, my wife. I'm just back from spring break, so it really is like we're taking a real class together. I just got back from spring break. I want to do a video as part of sort of the dialogue section of the course. I may do some more. As I talked about in my previous video about dialogue, you're going to be largely on your own here. I am not one of the great playwrights of the 21st century. How to write good dialogue is it's been well documented, and it's kind of a solved problem in a sense. That playwrights and other people have been at this for like hundreds of years, and more recently, writers of film and teleplays, and now video games. There's a mountain of research out there and books on how to write good dialogue, and there's a lot of knowledge on just how to get good at it. Which involves a lot of just doing it and sucking and doing it some more. But I do want to talk about a couple aspects of dialogue that are unique to video games. And it won't be a surprise to you if you've played a game before. You'll be familiar with these. And then I do want to talk about, though, the importance of research, which is not unique to video game writing. The importance of research, novelists do it, and film writers and everybody else. But I guess I want to touch on it because I think it's important enough. I think it's still something that we could probably. I think it's worth talking about. We talked about when we talked about characters, and we talked about how the fast pace of video game development sometimes leads us to just make sort of cliched characters, reuse the same tropes over and over again. Research, doing the type of research to make sure your dialogue sounds authentic and powerful or what have you. I don't think it's done a lot by video game writers. If that makes sense. I think it's probably another area where, as a whole, us, video game writers, all of us, we could do a lot better at. So I'm going to mention it and show you some examples, as I always do. And then we'll see. Maybe I'll do more videos about writing dialogue for video games, or maybe that'll be enough. And we'll wrap up the sort of the process portion and talk about some other things. So let's get into it. I want to talk about barks, or I used to call them voiceovers. I don't know why. Early 2000s, I learned to call them voiceovers. What are they? I mean, you've seen these in a million games. It's the stuff that is sort of said around you. It could be reactions to the NPCs, of you shooting them in the head or helping them. It's just the chatter that goes. You're wandering through a village, and it's a chatter that goes on around you, that you could hear because it's in your, because your playable character is nearby, and there's a proximity trigger, and NPCs will chatter amongst themselves, and it helps build immersion, and it can also yield some interesting and valuable clues to what quest you're on, that kind of thing. Nothing new, but let's talk about them anyway. And I guess what I want to do is I'll show a few examples, but what I kind of want to do more is talk about my philosophy behind these. Then we'll go into research. Here's some dialogue that I wrote for a game called Ultra Wings 2. Really cool VR game done by my friend Chris Stockman of Bit Planet Games. And if you have an Oculus VR headset, you do really well to pick up Ultra Wings 1 and 2, or both. It's a really cool use of VR. Games did well for him, as they should have. But you get to pilot these different aircraft, and fantastic use of the technology. Barks. We know what barks are, right? If you don't, you got to play more video games. But barks are things that are said usually by NPCs, characters in the world that you're sort of playing in, as maybe they react to things, maybe they're reacting to you, maybe they're reacting to something else, maybe they're just going about their business. They're often used to give the player some kind of feedback as to what's going on. And here, this character, if we call it character, is a character you never see. It is the voice of sort of your flight instructor who comes through a wall speaker. So you're a pilot, and when you're done with a mission, you go back to sort of your headquarters, and your flight instructor will sort of communicate with you through a PA system. If you crash, you get some feedback right away. I think through you as a player, the pilot, ostensibly you have an earpiece that you can also get communication through. And so we have a circumstance, player crashes the plane. And it's kind of my job to write, I don't know how many did I write? I wrote 27 things for the player to hear, the player who's a pilot to hear from their flight instructor about, you crashed. It's reacting to you crashed. So it's a pretty specific circumstance. You've crashed the plane. However, we don't know the nature of the crash. You may have crashed into a building. You may have just crashed. Maybe the ground came up and got you. Maybe you crashed into an enemy aircraft or a friendly aircraft. So one of the things that you have to remember when writing barks is that they have to fit any and all scenarios. Often, right? Like all of these can be will make sense if you crash the plane. And if you crash the plane and you walk away and you come back and your flight instructor says something to you. It doesn't matter what you crash into. It doesn't matter how you landed. It doesn't matter this line. Oh, here it is. This line triggers when the player returns to the office if they crash during the mission. You don't hear it through an earpiece. You hear it when you crash a plane. You return to the office and you get a response, a snarky response from your flight instructor. So that's something that we all know what barks are, but they're a little trickier to write than you might think. You really have to think them through and make sure that they can fit the trigger or circumstance, fit that specific trigger or circumstance completely, and in all cases of crashing this plane, these work. What's also a little unique about these particular 27, this game is kind of lighthearted, meant to be somewhat humorous. You could crash the plane, go back to your HQ, and the video of your crash has 60,000 views already. I can't stop watching it. Okay, ho ho ho. But I note that because I am going to have something to say about. Well, actually, I'll just say it now while we're looking at it. These are barks. Okay. Again, you crash the plane. You go back to HQ. You hear one of these randomly. Doesn't matter what order they're in. That's on purpose. Doesn't matter how you crash the plane. We're not being that specific. Sometimes these can get very granular, and you have to be careful. to get too granular. Writing a snarky response for you crashing something, I was able to get 27 cranked out. When you start to get too granular, write me 27 barks for when you crash into a radio antenna. It starts to get more and more, more and more. The more granular they are, the more specific, the harder it is to maybe write stuff that's unique. But getting back to the lightheartedness of this game, it would have been a lot easier just to write 27 sort of straightforward things for the pilot to say, And I don't mean to say that writing drama is easy. It's not. But it would have been, probably a lot easier if we were to say this game is, meant to be quite straightforward and somewhat serious in tone. Okay. All right, you're all right, pilot. I want you to go to the medical. We're going to take you to the medical bay, have you checked out for concussion. You're gonna be off your feet for a few days. That kind of thing, right? But this game was lighthearted, and we really, wanted to make it humorous. So these are barks, but what I'm also doing here, and I do a lot of these, is I'm joke writing. You're joke writing. And joke writing is just difficult. I've always heard, writing humor is some of the hardest writing that you could do. I think so. I think that's probably true. I like to do it. I've worked on a lot of games that are lighthearted or just even comedic. Possibly carved out a little bit of a niche for myself in that respect, and cool. I like it. My point is, joke writing is difficult. Is more difficult than writing a straightforward bark. And you need to account for that when you are planning, scheduling, deciding, well, how much time do I want to spend on barks? And if the answer is, well, they're going to be, a lot of them need to be funny. Well, you're joke, okay, great. Now you're joke writing. You're not just writing barks, you're joke writing. Jokes are hard to write. They're hard to come up with. Good ones. Ones that you're, not embarrassed to write. Not embarrassed to record and put in the game. So anyway, I guess I wanted to kind of make that point, it took me a while to get there, because I'm a freelancer. And so I have to estimate, based on how long it'll take me to do something. And if I'm writing jokes, it's harder, and I have to account for that. So let's look at something else here. This is more dialogue that's sort of in the world, interactive dialogue. I don't know if these really count as barks, but, we've got here, let's see. We have here some lore. We do stuff in video games. Another thing that we can do is we can just put stuff in the world that players can, if they're exploring, and if they care, they can find it. They can examine it. They can listen to it. Like in BioShock, I think you could find these, cassette tapes laying around and play them and listen to them. Or, you could find actual, a scroll. And I think this is from Portal Knights. I had a lot of fun with Portal Knights, published by 505 Games. Great guy, David Welch, brought me on. And, a lot of fun. I think it's still supported and still out there. So, let's see here, row 95. You can find a diary belonging to a pirate captain of old. You can ignore the page breaks there. That's something I had to put in there to to split it all up. But, I'm writing some sort of lore that the player can read and learn more about this place. I think this is a pirate hideout called Landlubber's Leap, I believe. Let me take actually another second to cover something else in this video. It's turned out to be kind of a smorgasbord of dialogue topics. Naming things is very difficult. It's just very difficult to find a cool name. And it also requires, I think, a lot of research. Some writers have a knack for it. My writing partner Matthew Enton is really good at it. I have to take more time. But it's very much like writing dialogue. If you want to avoid cliche, you've got to sort of dig deep, do some research, and naming things is very difficult. You know, and that's a good reason to when you're working with a team. And you just give things like code names and you stick with those the whole, because the real name, the player facing name may change a dozen times. you know, so I think working with the team, we probably just call this like Pirate Cove, and in all the formal documentation and other things, we would just say refer to it as Pirate Cove. And at some point we landed on Landlubber's Leap as the player facing name. So yeah, I'm glad we covered that. So there's lore, okay, and there's some more stuff, wanted posters and things like that. But yeah, you can find NPCs in the world, interact with them, hear something. Here's a bartender. He doesn't have anything super important to say. But he has some fun things to say. And it helps the player feel like they're in this real immersive world with characters that are actually responding to them and talking to them and all that stuff. We can also have full on sort of scripted events. Conversations can be taking place, right? Like two NPCs could be just sitting there, like I said, inside this bar and tavern. I don't think we called it a tavern because it's a kid's game, but they could be having their own conversation that the player can stop and listen to, or can just keep going, right? It's all it's all really cool, fun stuff that video games can do, and it adds up. It can add up to a lot. I'm sure, as you can imagine, these games with these big open worlds and lots of non-player characters who can interact with you and interact with each other. As you can imagine, it can add up to a lot of dialogue. And I'll talk about that here in a second. I'll make you look at me again instead of the spreadsheet. I know it's not much of an improvement, but bear with me here. Okay, so we talked about, I talked about Barks a little bit, and back and forth between the NPCs and lore writing. And I talked about how it can add up to be a ton of stuff. So you have these big open world games, and there's a whole narrative department cranking away at these things. In fact, and I read recently that this is April 3rd, 2023. I'm recording this, but AI is also Chat GP 2.34. I don't whatever. AI has become a thing, and a major developer and publisher of games has released a pretty cool technology that where the AI will help their writers come up with dialogue, and it's used a lot for this sort of like for Barks, because you just have a massive quantity of writing to write, and then sometimes record, and then translate into languages. And I'm no futurist. I'm not judging. I'm 50 years old. I'll probably run out the clock on my game career fairly soon, and it's your problem. I don't know. AI, it's going to be part of probably of your life, I guess, as a narrative designer at some point. But here's what I will say, and I was going to talk about this even before it occurred to me or even before this developer publisher talked about their AI writing tool that helps writers select lots of Barks and ease the burden on the writers. So I probably it's been working in games since 2001. Not, I probably got more serious into writing in a few years after that, and worked on a lot of games. I may have written at this point, I don't know, it may have been tens of thousands of barks. I maybe over 100. I don't know. I don't know. I've written a lot. Bowling games, flight simulators, all kinds of stuff. And here's what maybe the whole reason why I made this video, and I made some good points. Naming things is hard. Naming things, joke writing with these barks can be much more difficult than when you're writing barks that aren't jokes. These barks, it's always tempting for us writers to not want to focus on them as hard because they're barks. We want to focus on the big cinematic moments. There's also a lot. They can be exhausting. You can get burnt out. So even when you're, there is maybe tendency to want to give it to the intern and be like, here, which can be great, can work out. Interns need to have a shot at game design interns and so forth. But here is what I think is that the barks and the NPC chatter and stuff like that is so important. And we know they're important, but I think they're so important in building this world. What are you going to hear most of the time with these big open world games? Is it these big cinematic moments? No, they're great. They come and they go, and that's it. You don't really watch them again unless you replay the game, right? You're going to spend most of your time reading, hearing, listening to barks and chatter and the quick interactions between NPCs and between the player and NPC, between you and the NPCs. You're going to spend 80-90% of your time hearing that stuff. So while each individual bark, there's 27 things if you crash your plane. You saw an example. If one of them in there is a clunker, not very funny or interesting, okay, it happens. But they're important. You're going to hear them a lot. And so my philosophy has been that just every line is important. Every single line. Believe me, even today, I'm doing some last minute kind of revisions of some like menu text and things for a Mario Rabbids project. That is not yet announced, but it will be. And it's tempted. I get to like the last one, and I'm tempted just to be like, oh, come on. They're all important. That's like pawns on a chessboard. Each individual pawn is not very exciting, maybe on its own, all the time. You may not think it's very important. Sometimes you even sacrifice them. But collectively, they're kind of the most important. Yeah, the king and the queen, and they get top billing, and we understand why. But without all those pawns working together to control the board, the king and the queen don't have a shot. So I have spent sometimes an embarrassing amount of time writing barks. Perfectionism can be kind of destructive. I don't want to get too far off topic, I think, for me. But then sometimes it comes in handy. I spent too much time. I'm a freelancer, and I'll estimate my time to write, barks or whatever, and then I'll spend more time on it than I should, because I just want them to be great, as great as I can. They're very important. So maybe still AI can can help with them, maybe, and someday AI will be good enough to make them great. I don't know. But I think no matter how many they are, you got to do your best to make them great. How do you do that? And then this is why I'm also going to talk about research. And maybe I'll make this a separate video. I think I'll make it, this video is long enough. I'll make another video about how research can help help you write great dialogue, but also just be a tremendous fuel, a tremendous source for you to make writing these things easier. All right, so I'll close this out. I'll do the research video. I'm going to be wearing the same t-shirt. I'm just going to roll right into it. So one more, well, maybe more than one more video, but we're almost done with the course, I promise.